was a very pivotal kind of experience for me because it changed my entire exposure of what I had in my life till that point. I got a chance to travel, meet people. It's a completely youth-led organization. So I took a lot of leadership opportunities. I became the vice president, then the president of the local chapter. The last part, which I think, something new we started in the last 2 years, it was actually an initiative which was inspired by the Cleveland Clinic, which was we started doing empathy training workshops in our hospital. Mm-hmm. And we do this once in 6 months for everyone. For me, the most bizarre thing which happens in India is that a cash patient pays more than an insurance patient.
Hey, my dear friends. Welcome back to yet another episode of Inspire Someone Today. Our promise is to get in inspirers every other week. And here we are with yet another inspirer. What caught my attention of their motto is, life lived in the service of others is worth living. How profound it is. And Ujjvala, our guest today, is somebody who runs a hospital but has an osmosis of being a doctor through the environment that she is part of, but a lawyer by profession. And when she's not running hospitals, she's running on the roads of Bangalore as a marathoner. It's my wonderful pleasure and joy to introduce and welcome Ujjvala on Inspire Someone Today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shrikant. Thank you for having me here.
Like I said, a lawyer by profession, and now you're at the helm of running hospitals and the healthcare industry. Very, very interesting transition from what you studied to what you have been doing. Again, a large part of it got to do with what your family has been doing in this particular space of healthcare and hospitals. Tell us, what was it like growing up in a doctor household? Was the pressure always there on you to become a doctor and you chose not to become one and became a lawyer?
Actually, it was the other way around. I had no pressure on becoming a doctor. And my father he was very, very, actually, I should also say I come from a family full of doctors. So my father, all his siblings are doctors. His father was a doctor. My brother eventually my younger brother became a doctor. But I grew up my entire life as knowing and assuming I will be a doctor. So everything I did was actually towards becoming a doctor. Because I just, looked up to my father. I thought it was a very natural profession. I actually grew up in Dubai, went to school in Dubai, where my father was practicing as a doctor. I moved to India for my 11th and 12th to a small residential school in Coorg called Coorg Public School, only with the intention to write the competitive exams and become a doctor. I finished, my 12th, I wrote the exams, but I realized I think I did not really want to be a doctor. And I actually called my dad and I said, I'm not really sure about it. And he was probably he surprised me a lot because he said, don't do it if you don't want to do it. I said, but I came here, I did all this. He said, it's fine. And I love to read. And, I think maybe it was the John Grisham novels that I read that the next thing that very, sounded interesting to me was to study law. So that's what I did. I came to Bangalore, I studied law, I did my 5-year program. I spent my entire 5 years in law school in a student organization called ISEC, which is, it's a global student organization that actually facilitates exchange programs across the world. This was a very pivotal kind of experience for me because it changed my entire exposure of what I had in my life till that point. I got a chance to travel, meet people. It's a completely youth-led organization. So I took a lot of leadership opportunities. I became the vice president, then the president of the local chapter. And I even worked full-time in Bombay for the national chapter for a year. So it really shaped the way I think today when I look back. It really changed. I think I spent so much of my college time doing this work that I think a lot of what I learned in terms of leading teams started at that point, So, but no pressure to be a doctor at all.
That's wonderful. And it's very interesting. The seeds of leadership was sown in there during your ISEC stint. And now walk us through what is a day in the life of a CEO, how easy, how difficult it is to be a CEO. And for the benefit of our listeners, you are the CEO of Aveksha Hospital. a multi-speciality hospital in north of Bangalore. So tell us, what's life like being a CEO of a hospital?
Well, I think it's been, so this is our ninth year. And I would say that every year my role has been different. The first few years, yes, was also the CEO, but I think I did everything right from, talking to patients to talking to doctors. My role has evolved a lot over the last many years. But today I would say, profession. So my day actually starts with exercise. Like you said, I discovered running, when I was 20, and I haven't stopped, with the exception of a few breaks. And so I start with exercise, and I think that's really my constant. I try to exercise at least 4 or 5 times a week. And then it's my kids, getting them ready, getting them off to school, etc. It's just like everyone else, the regular routine. I'm in office by 10. My first thing I do is I spend the first half an hour actually not talking to anyone. I really reflect on my previous day and what I was and was not able to complete. And I spend the next 15, 20 minutes planning my day. I really think that we tend to, do a lot of tasks, but I think I stopped doing a task list about a year ago, because I realized that a task list makes you feel like you did a lot of work, but you're not really focusing on what you needed to get done. So I use a really interesting tool that I discovered. It's called Sunsama. It's like kind of like I don't want to call it a task list, but I feel like it's helped me organize my life, because I create my priorities. I check in on a day and I check out as well on that app. And it's across all my platforms, on my phone, on my desktop, on my laptop. So it's really helped me organize my life in both my personal and professionally. So I spend my first 30 minutes on that. The rest of my day is mostly with people. I spend time with different teams or different groups of people, because I really think that is the biggest value I can add to people, by kind of giving my time to them. And I compartmentalize my days based on, different functions within the hospital. I also try to keep one day aside to think, or to not actually do anything operationally. It's very hard really to do that. There are some weeks I don't end up doing it, but I think that's something I constantly strive to do.
And in the role that you're in and the operations that you're running, it's literally managing life and death on a day in, day out basis. How easy or difficult it is for you to manage stress, just not for yourself, but for your larger team as well. Lot of the doctors on your team, many times a thankless job, right? You need to kind of have them be on their toes, attend to the patients, ensure what exigencies happen. So how do you manage this whole element of stress management and also getting your team always buoyed for the challenge that's lying ahead of them?
This is a very interesting question. And I think COVID really pushed us to limits that we never thought we could, we had really. But I would say that, how we try to do this is really, a healthcare system is stressful because there are lots of players involved. A doctor cannot treat a patient alone. He or she depends on, the nursing care, the clinical, the technical staff, the technicians who are, let's say, doing, an ECG or doing a radiology test, or a lab technician who's, drawing blood and their accuracy of being able to give the right results. They rely on other doctors who are, treating other, for example, illnesses that the same patient may have. They're relying on the billing team to correctly update the patient and patient's family, and, make sure that worry about money or the clarity on the bill, etc. So there are so many different moving parts. And I think that the biggest source of stress for doctors is actually the non-clinical, because they know their job, they know what they need to do, but they are very, very affected when everything else is not working. When they receive a blood report that is inaccurate, it really stresses out, because it can affect the whole course of treatment for a patient. If the patient's insurance policy is rejected, the patient's family is obviously completely, upset and very, very, shaken. And that will, in turn impact the patient and then impact the doctor's treatment. So these things really throw doctors completely off course. And, for them, it's also not something they can directly solve. So I think that the first thing really that we sit down and kind of on a weekly basis ask our doctors is, what are we doing wrong? Which team is not, for example, up to the mark. I think the clinical takes the top priority because that's something which I think we cannot afford to go wrong. We put a lot of check mechanisms to make sure that, for example, you have an abnormal lab report, to make sure that they rerun that report. There are test runs done prior to them releasing these reports. These are also part of, a lot of NABH is something that governs hospitals. That is the National Accreditation Board for Hospitals. So we have to anyway follow these protocols, but sometimes, you tend not to do it. But I think these become very critical to make sure that doctors are not stressed. The other big part is managing the family of the patient. I think that doctors should not have to always manage the family, because the family's concerns are in one part of, what's happening with my family member, is he or she being treated, what is happening, etc. But they have other many concerns, right? Like the food is not come on time, or the ward girl, didn't come this morning to give the bath at the right time, or the injection. These are, if we keep them comfortable and keep them informed and they feel that nothing is going wrong. And I think that open line of communication is one of the most critical pieces in my view. I find that, I spend once a week, I meet a dialysis patient in the hospital. The reason I say specifically dialysis patients are patients who come to the hospital 2 or 3 times a week and spend almost 4 to 5 hours at a stretch in the hospital, which means he or she knows more about the hospital than even I do. Because they know when the lift guy is having a bad day, they know when the nurse, is having a not so great day. And, they can give you so much information about what's going wrong in your system. And I feel that keeping that ear to the ground and knowing, because we are so people dependent, people don't realize a hospital, like technology is important, yes, but everything has to happen through a person. So we're so dependent on people. And, in India, that's a very tough, a big challenge, because training people is a huge challenge. You don't get, staff are always trained and they're coming, like a ready-made kind of, you have to start from scratch. So that's a huge challenge. The last part, which I think, something new we started in the last 2 years, it was actually an initiative which was inspired by the Cleveland Clinic, which was we started doing empathy training workshops in our hospital. Mm-hmm. And we do this once in 6 months for everyone. What do I mean? Because, I think it's very easy to become jaded when you see sick people every day. It becomes, you lose your empathy because it's part and parcel of what you do. And it happens to doctors, it happens to everyone working in, it can happen to me, it happens to anyone working in a healthcare system. You hear every day, you hear accident, head injury, delivery, death. This is like a day-to-day kind of it's not common for everyone outside a healthcare system, but it's very common for us. So I think losing our empathy it happens without us realizing it. So this empathy training workshop I have found has really, it kind of is like an aha moment, like where staff and all of us realize that, we stop caring, we stop looking at a patient as an individual with his or her own burdens and own problems. We start looking at them just as the illness that they've come with. Okay, it's a burns patient that has come.
Yeah, it's kind of an unconscious bias that you have, right? Because you kind of see this day in, day out. And one other piece that was on my mind while we were stating all of these things was in the corporate world, if you want to motivate your colleagues, you have a rewards recognition program. You can use that as a means to motivate people. Do doctors need similar kind of a motivation? Answer is, of course, yes, they are humans. But it would be interesting to hear from the CEO, how do you motivate your team?
I think, so, doctors, actually, I would classify doctors in a very different category of people compared to everyone else working in a hospital. And doctors are of many, many kinds. I would say that you can't obviously, generalize and paint them with the same brush. But different doctors are motivated by different things. There are some doctors who work with us who are very, very service oriented, and actually they're genuinely not interested in, for example, what is the remuneration or what happened, how many patients did I see? That's not their concern at all. And then you also have a lot of doctors for whom, the financial remuneration is a very important piece of their work, because also that they have financial commitments because, everyone knows how expensive it is to become a doctor, in our country. And then they would have, they would be severely in debt, etc. But having said that, I would say that a lot of doctors, in my view, is that they operate from a place of, I would say, a little bit of, fear, right? Where they want all the outcomes to be good. This is a very new kind of phenomenon. Like my grandfather, when he operated, he was like a god. Whatever he said, he practiced in Davangere for 40 years. And whatever he said was followed, like the letter of, God, so to speak, right? I don't think anyone ever questioned him. Today, my brother who's practicing has to convince his patients what their diagnosis is, why it is what it is. They have to show him when they come back and they say, but Google said this. And he has to tell them, no, why was, Google not accurate and what is the, difference, etc., etc. So it's a very, very different world in which today's doctors are practicing, right? And I think many senior doctors in the industry have spoken about this, which is that doctors are not taught how to manage this. They're taught how to treat patients. They're taught how to diagnose a patient, but they're not taught how to communicate with a patient. They're not taught how to, what's the right way to counsel a family. This is not part of the training in India, which is actually really sad. So coming back to motivation, the reason I say this is because I feel that there is a gap, right? There is a gap between where doctors, like a lot of doctors fall into the category where they feel like, okay, let me just look at it as a spectrum of patients and how many I've treated, etc. And a lot of doctors are actually looking at service and saying, I want to do good work and money will come, whatever, right? And the reason it's actually either money or not at this point in time. But we have to change this. We have to change it because by giving them a secure environment to practice in, I really think that's the way we can motivate doctors to do a lot more. Like creating teams, for example. That's a small way. For example, we have a team of ICU doctors. And so in the ICU, they see the most number of critical patients. I would say that if I had an individual doctor leading this team, he would not be willing to take as many risks as we currently do. But because it's a team of doctors that we work with, they all feel very confident in each other's presence. And, the fact that if I'm not there, he or she is there and they know each other and they also use, a very robust technology to, where it's a completely electronic medical record. So they know at any given point, what is a patient's condition. So there's such a sense of trust so I have seen that because of this team, our ICU takes in all kinds of critical patients. I've never seen us turn down a single patient, but that's because of the fact that they all have that, kind of a guardrail or the support system that they know that if I'm not able to make it, someone else will.
So having seen this team working in such close quarters, like I said, on a daily basis, they deal with matter of life and death. What, according to you, are the top 3 ingredients of making a good team or a great team?
I would say the first thing is communication. There's no doubt. An absolute open, transparent communication channel is the most critical piece in a team working. I would also say that creating a sense of fairness within a team, healthcare and many, I would say, industries are very hierarchical. The traditional structure has been very hierarchical, very, top heavy, very, orders kind of given and juniors have to just follow them. That has to change because, we have a lot more talented people. We have a lot more educated people in the system who have come from very good places, right? Because they've come from good institutes, good colleges. So I think that we have to move towards a more fair and flat structure, which I know in many industries, for example, I think in the IT industry has happened very, very well. We are a little ways behind, y'all, but I think that's important for a good team structure. And the last piece I would say is creating a level playing ground in terms of their training and their knowledge levels. Because in a team, oftentimes you have people coming from different institutes and different organizations, and they may not always all be as, I would say, on an equal footing as far as the training is concerned. And I think it becomes important for us at either the time of hiring or post-hiring that we make that effort to create that level of commonality in terms of their training and their knowledge levels, etc. I think I would say these three are the very most critical pieces.
Great. I know the times that we are in, it's challenging, it's ever changing. We call it as a VUCA world, right? So there is change that happening all the time. And you did make a great point, particularly in this industry, due to the access to information technology. Lot many times there is information available on WhatsApp University, on Google before they come to the doctors. I'll flip that same conversation slightly differently on the other side of the patient ecosystem. Is while there is a great deal of appreciation of what the healthcare industry did, particularly during the COVID time period, outside of that, there still seems to be that lack of trust between the general public and the hospitals, right? You did make some great points in terms of communication, in terms of the ecosystem of the insurance agents, the laboratory professionals, things like that. How do you kind of look into this particular element of building that trust, making health service affordable in a country like ours, particularly where it is limited only to the big cities? As you get into tier 2, tier 3 cities, it becomes even more worse. And there are taboos around this system. If you get into a hospital, then your life earnings is gone, right? So those are some of the things that is kind of built around as a story on the other side of the ecosystem. So, as a CEO, how do you see this? What are the things that you think can be done better to bridge this gap of trust deficit?
Right. I mean, I agree. I 100% agree with you. I've probably also been on the receiving end of as a patient and struggling to get access to information or, where I feel like, why is this happening? So I totally agree with you. Maybe it's happened within my hospital without us being aware of it. I think we have to first go back to the root of understanding where this trust deficit has come from. And I think there are very valid reasons why this trust deficit has happened. The first point being that the way medicine is practiced itself, right, by doctors. And the first is, like I said, I think, and today doctors have become cognizant of this, where earlier, if you went to a doctor, they would say, this is the problem. And they would give you a list of medicines and they eat this at this time, eat this at that time. They would not really, you may not even know of those three medicines, what am I eating, which medicine for, right? Today, that cannot work anymore. Today, a doctor has to be very, very transparent and clear about what they're treating, why they're treating, what they're treating, their logic or their reasoning for what they're doing. So you come to essentially, largely medicine is eliminating different diagnoses. It's not like the scientific 1 + 1 = 2. It's like these are your symptoms. These could be the possible diagnosis. And then you eliminate on the basis of, their experience and what they have seen, etc. So, but today as a doctor, I would need to come to you and tell you that, this is what I think. These are your medicines, and be very clear in terms of what you're prescribing, why you're prescribing these medicines, and it may not cure you. So come back to me if this happens, etc. Be very, I would say again, go back to that open, transparent communication. It happened many times. For example, a patient comes in, this happens in emergencies, right? Let's say a patient has come in, a baby, and they're on a ventilator. And the family is obviously in distress, but we are not explaining in detail to the patient what's happening because we don't think that they can understand. So this is a common thing in India, where I would say that I don't want to say doctor, I want to say the entire healthcare system assumes that the other person or the patient don't know. So let's not get into the details. But actually, that does not work anymore. I think, I don't even know if it worked in the past, but that's a big reason for the trust deficit, right? So you have to be very clear, almost down to, I think this is the chances of survival, etc., which it's hard for maybe the family to hear, but you have to make them hear it. The second part for this trust has been, with very valid reason, I would say, with the larger healthcare groups coming into the picture, billings have gone, skyrocketed in many ways. For me, the most bizarre thing which happens in India is that a cash patient pays more than an insurance patient, which is not true anywhere else in the world. If I walk into a hospital and I'm willing to pay cash, I'm probably paying more than what the insurance company is, paying the hospital. This is not, I would say, not the right direction in which we're all headed, right? And we have to correct it. We have to correct it and do it well. We are seeing healthcare systems across the world collapsing. It could be the big economies have not been able to figure this out, right? We are in a very, I would say, interesting time where we can fix this problem. Fix this by being open and transparent. I think that, see, today you have to go and see a hospital bill. The hospital bill is a very interesting bill that you read. Like, have you ever asked a lawyer for a bill? Probably not, right? A lawyer is not giving you an itemized bill saying, for briefs, I'm charging you this much. For appearing in high court, I'm charging you this much. For appearing in lower court, for filing XYZ. That's not how a doctor
It's a
lawyer's
fees.
bill. It's just
It's a
like,
fees.
this is my fee, take it. But a hospital bill is one itemized list of almost 500 items, which looks like Greek and Latin to a patient and in no real order, and that's where the suspicion comes. Now you're like, I have 5 pages worth of a bill and, resulting in 1.5 lakhs or whatever the amount may be. And it's like, what am I paying for? Like a common question, which I have seen, right, is that there's a patient who's been in the ICU for 10 days, okay, and they've put, say, 3 boxes of gloves. And the family's like, they didn't use 3 boxes of gloves. And then, the billing guy's like, no, actually, 3 times a day, 5 people saw the patient, each of them wearing 1 pair of gloves. No, this is how, and to me, it's almost like, why are we doing this? And frankly, I would say we are also guilty of this. We have to change, we have to innovate how we are billing patients, right? And I would say that, see, while cost itself is a very interesting, the cost of a professional is something you cannot put an X or Y value to, right? But that's actually the least. If you see any hospital bill, the doctor's charges is the least. It'll be like, out of that 1.5 lakh, 20,000, which is, I actually find the other way around. You're paying for the professional, you're not paying for everything. Everything else is actually paraphernalia.
Right.
If you really think about it, as far as the patient is concerned. So they really need to know their bill should also look different. Actually, this is something I care a lot about. And we're working, also with like a design firm to look at use design thinking to redesign our bills. And we're actually also in the process of working with a company to develop a new hospital software, because I think I would look at a bill as incidents, right? Like in the ER, this was how much I was charged. In the ICU, this was my bill. Because that's a chronology of events, right? Of how my patient went through the hospital, as opposed to right now the categorization is doctors, consumables, medicines, lab, radiology. You don't know when, where,
the chronology is missing.
Test happens. So it's really, so I think these are the small things, but it all adds up, and of course we've had a lot of bad practices in the system. We've had, things like referrals, giving, ambulance. There's like a long list of things, which these are genuinely not good industry practices. Of course, we are getting disrupted as an industry. You have the pristine cares of the world coming in and disrupting us. So this is going to change. You can't afford to be doing the old style of working anymore. I don't think any hospital will survive. So, and insurance companies are getting disrupted. You have the newer age insurance companies. They're talking about having a common platform in actually as early as June or July. The most interesting development for me is actually coming from the government, which is the National Health Authority is actually launching a universal health record, which is going to become compulsory over the next couple of years. They're right now doing it in such a way that they're incentivizing hospitals to be having a universal health record. I think a big part, my health record is my right. Today, it's actually the hospital's property in many ways, right? You just take your reports and you go. But tomorrow, how do you know? Like if I go from X to Y hospital, I should be able to transfer my hospital record there. So they know everything about my past and my history, etc., which is not there at this point in time. I think these things will really give power back to the customer, and they will be able to control what happened and where. And that's when you feel confident. I don't think it's only about money. Today it becomes easy to equate everything back to money, but I think a lot of it is to do with information, the way information is communicated. A lot of things has got to do with, do I have control over my own decision making in a hospital?
I think the clarity of communication, you kind of said it so well. And the fact is that I heard 2 very nice phrases that you used. One is about the whole empathy training that you mentioned about first element. The second piece of is whole design thinking, which also goes to say that lot of the hospitals are also turning towards running it as a professional setup. It's no longer that okay, hospital has to be run like in hospital, but there are folks like you who are turning it around, saying that let's make it a lot more professional. And that kind of leads me to a question which lot of our listeners would also benefit is if people are looking at a profession in this field, right? Being professionals in it, not necessarily being doctors, but you can play multiple roles in this particular field. What are some of the things that they can look forward to? What are some opportunities that exist? What kind of skills is needed for them to fit in this kind of a? I think this is a tipping point, great moment for us to kind of be part of the changing landscape of the healthcare industry in India and worldwide. So, what can folks do?
So I would say there are two types of healthcare organizations. One is the more traditional service providers like myself, which are hospitals, and there are many opportunities there. The second part, which is the health tech kind of, I would say universe today, right? Because health tech has expanded in a rapid pace, and there are a lot of organizations doing a lot of interesting work. One of the, for example, startups that we've been working with is called Cloud Physician. They're a tele-ICU company led by two doctors, and they have a big team of doctors. We also have a big team of technology professionals working with them. And similarly, there are many other, I would say, health tech startups, and the opportunities here are as good as any other, startup universe. But if I have to talk about the more traditional healthcare model, and I think this is where we need good people to come to healthcare. Healthcare has been traditionally an industry where, unless you've already been in healthcare or you're connected to healthcare, you don't
Right.
tend to go there because it looks too out of scope. I would say the first area is finance, right? Because at the end of the day, healthcare is a very complex system. There is, you have a big, I had to actually, learn so much, especially on finance, because you have first, you have all these different sources of revenue, right? Because it's not only cash, you have your cash, insurance, you have money coming through TPAs, you have coming now through corporates, you have your government, teams, etc. And then on the other side, on the patient side, you have so many different types of transactions happening. So it's a very, very complex from a pure finance point of view, right? So I would say finance operations requires a lot of good people, and you don't have to be in healthcare. You just have to be a finance person to get into it. I don't even think we require help. Actually, the CFO who works with us worked with Airtel in the past. So, I don't think you require someone who only comes from healthcare. The second is also the strategic finance, because I think today, like I told you, most healthcare organizations realize that they can't remain one. They have to grow, they have to scale. And this is where strategic finance becomes very critical. Most hospitals that are either led by doctors are typically, finance becomes our weakest area, where we require good people, talented people to come here. The second is HR, talent management. Talent, we are just like any other industry. With our technical skills are just slightly different from the other industries. It can be, these are skills that can be learned. You can learn how to evaluate. You don't have to interview every doctor or every healthcare professional. That can be kept aside, but everything else, it remains the same. Like you said, we need reward and recognition programs. We need, processes within the system. We need the same structures that any other industry requires, right? So I would say that's the second area. The third area is actually patient relations, which is like things like billing, which are non-clinical services, but patient connected to the patient. These are skills that can be learned. Yes, hospitals tend to stay away from people who have not worked in healthcare because they feel it's hard to teach. My personal experience actually has been that we have always preferred people who don't come from healthcare so we can train them from scratch so that they don't have to unlearn what they did in their
Hospitals.
other industries. My personal favorite is actually from for example, a hotel background. I found that, I don't have to train in terms of being polite. Empathy comes so much more because especially in hotel management, they teach you from day one and you're on the job from day one. So I feel like these are the top three areas that come to mind. But of course, now we have digital marketing, for example. Hospitals are forced to look at marketing and digital marketing. So these are all universal. I wouldn't make them. They're not. Like in any industry, you have to understand your patient. You have to understand the doctors. You can't, like, for example, I have a team member on my team who leads digital marketing, and he spends a lot of time talking to doctors because he's learning from them. If he has to, for example, do search word optimization, he has to, what are the a patient is typing, symptoms. So he has to understand what are the symptoms of hernia, what are the symptoms of, arthritis, or what are the symptoms of a root canal, because the patient is going to type as for what they know. So we have to then translate that into a disease and then attract them and whatever, right? So you have to be willing to get into understanding some technicalities of healthcare. I think that's very important. You also have to be willing to walk in knowing that you're not walking to a very happy place, in the sense that most patients are coming there with a lot of stress, but it's also a very, very fulfilling, very, very, I would say, a rewarding job to work in healthcare, because you get to see some really inspiring stories, some really, so much gratitude and love from families. Sometimes it's really, really touching. Along with the sorrow, we get to see a lot of happy, times, a lot of love from patients, and it's really unconditional. And that, I think, is rare, which you don't get to see in most sectors.
You being part of the family business, the tendency, what I have observed is you either continue to be part of the family business or you break away from it and want to do something else, because that's what you have seen all through your life. You have the tendency to do something different. Did that thought occur to you at all? And what has been your learnings by being part of this family business, and how has it helped you to kind of be that professional that you are today?
So, my journey is a little interesting because my father was building this business as I was, when I joined it, so I joined at the time of the construction stage, and I've been part of that journey. My intention was actually not to continue. I told him I'm going to do this only for 2 or 3 years, and then I will go back to my profession. And then you realize that you can't really do that because, building your own business is its own, like, there's never stepping away. Unless, maybe it can happen in the future. But how I look at it, I actually feel I'm so privileged because I am getting this opportunity, literally, I'm getting a stage, a platform, which otherwise, if I had to be here, if I had to build this on my own, it would take me maybe 20, 30 years, if I could do it even. And I think that I'm very lucky to be here, to get this opportunity, as just by being the daughter of, my father, right? And if it would be quite, almost, I would say it would be quite foolish of me to walk away from it without doing it, giving it my best. I would say that each opportunity comes with its pros and cons. Working with your own families can be hard at times, but there's no line, where you don't just come back home and say now, you can't leave things in the office, because even over dinner or even at a family function, you're always discussing work, and, it's very hard to separate things. So there are pros and cons, but I would say that which comes with every kind of opportunity. If I was working in a corporate also, I would say that there would be pros and cons there too. So I think how I look at it is this, it's a real privilege for me to be this. What I do with this opportunity, how I take this to the next level is really on me. And how I am able to build this from here is the challenge in front of me. And I think that for me, it's very exciting and very, inspiring to be in this place, So I don't see myself going away and doing anything else, at least not in the near future, for sure.
Wonderful. Definitely the sector needs people like you. So you don't go away anywhere, but build it to the next level so that the country and the world is proud of what you're doing. Okay, we are here with Ujjvala with the power of 3 round. 3 research findings about happiness and resilience post-pandemic.
3 post-pandemic. Okay, I would say that one is make time for yourself. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing. I think we all have to realize that we have to make time for self-care, self-reflection, knowing where otherwise we're just going sometimes, with this, like the rigor of life and forgetting ourselves. I particularly think it's important for moms and women to do this. They have a tendency to forget themselves in this whole taking care of kids and family and work. The second one is to keep moving. I would say that the importance of just exercise and physical being outside, being just even whether it's a walk or a run or just doing something that involves movement. I would say that's because during COVID, I felt that even more when I was going to the hospital, but I couldn't do anything else. I just felt so tied in. And I think that that's something which, that opens so much in our system that, we need to kind of, I don't know, like it gives you this adrenaline rush just when you're just physical. The last one, I would say is actually like this very, I don't know, it sounds a bit cliched, but like a carpe diem, like be in the moment, enjoy the moment. I think we're always, in this rush of what we're going to do next month, next year, next 10 years, next 5 years. We're always looking ahead and not happy with where we are. And I think that's important. You should feel a sense of restlessness to grow, but also you should be happy, when you go out for that dinner, keeping your phones away, giving all your whole self in that time, being there with your, loved ones, friends, work colleagues, whoever it might be, just being there. I think these would be my 3 big learnings.
You always have heard this saying that what would be your advice for your younger self? So over here, I flip it around and say,
Yeah.
what would be your advice to your older self? 10 years from now, if you were to kind of look back and say, okay, these are the things, Ujjvala, you got to be doing or not doing.
Well, first thing I would say is not to stop working. Because, I feel I do not like this idea of retirement, and I actually don't like it for older people. I don't think I want to ever do it myself, because actually I think as you get older, you have more energy. Maybe yes, sometimes you have some physical limitations because of health conditions, but I feel like mentally you've got so much more to give. You actually have so much more free time because you're when you're younger, you have kids, your responsibilities, etc., etc. Now you actually, I see it. So I tell this to my parents. I tell this. I even wanted to tell myself, don't stop working. I think it's very, very important. I would say continue to move because I'm hoping that I would still be doing some form of exercise. I think it's just more and more important. I read somewhere that one of the best sports to play when you're older is tennis. It's probably the number one, the best sport for aging populations. I was very surprised actually, but I think it's because it would be a combination of playing with other people as well as being a physical activity. So I was actually telling I should learn how to play tennis in preparation for getting older. The last one was just to be very kind to yourself. I think, not to be harsh and say that, you didn't do this or you didn't do that, but just kind of be a little more kind and appreciate just what you did.
And in the career journey that you have had so far, what has been your 3 life lessons?
Well, the first thing is people. Like, I think people are the most important thing. That's how anything happens in this world. That's how things get done. People are the most. You can have any big dream or you can have money, but if you don't have the right people, you can't do anything. So I think people are one of the most important things in your entire life, career journey. The second thing is, to dream big sometimes and not get caught up in the details, because I think you have to look at the big picture. My father always said, if you reach for the stars, you may touch the sky. If you reach for the moon, you may touch the stars, etc. So I think you have to really dream big. The third one is actually contradictory to my second one, which is that you also focus on the details, because the real experience of your customer is in the details, is in that finer aspects of how you designed what you did. So I know it's contradicting my second one, but I think that's also equally important.
On those lines, what would be things on your bucket list then?
Actually, my bucket list involves a lot of travel, I would say. So my first, I don't know how long your bucket list is, but my immediate big thing on my list is to do an Olympic triathlon. I want to do it. I turned 40 in a few years and I want to do it before I turn 40. That's my goal. I did a sprint triathlon recently as just to understand what the experience of doing a bigger distance would be like. I really want to go to the Himalaya base camp once. I know and even check up the Machu Picchu mountains.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a childhood dream. I don't know why. What about Machu Picchu? I just read a lot about it. And the last thing would be just diving. I want to dive in as many places, deep sea diving, that I can.
Nice. I know you have been an voracious reader. for all of our listeners, what would be your 3 book recommendations?
So the first book would be Autobiography of a Yogi. I read it when I was, 21. My mentor actually made me read it. He was my first boss and today a close friend. It changed my life. I still go back to that book very much. It also started me on my spiritual journey. So it was like a very special book to me. The second book would be, actually I wouldn't, so, when I give book recommendations, I realize that people who love reading anyway have a lot of books on their list. So I have to give one book which is targeted for people who don't like to read. So this book is actually called The Boy, the Fox, the Mole, and the Horse by Charlie McKessie. It's a really amazing book and it's my favorite gift to give. Anyone who knows me knows I've gifted them this book. The last book would be the book that I recently finished called Atomic Habits. I loved it. I thought it was very thought-provoking.
Wonderful, Ujjvala. That was the Power of 3 round. Thank you so much for being a sport and participating in the Power of 3. We'll check along. So we'll check along to our last segment of what we want to have this conversation with you. And it's all about leadership. Since you're at the helm of what you're doing, it's only fair to ask some leadership questions to you. And again, how do you kind of get better with your craft? That's a focus in this particular segment is as a leader, you're at the helm of it, you're managing so many different responsibilities, so many different projects. Does self-doubt ever crop up? And if so, what is your mechanism to handle it?
Self-doubt crops up all the time. I don't think at least not most of us are immune to that. There are different things. Actually, there was one thing that I'd like to mention. I felt a couple of years ago, I felt that, am I right? Am I well equipped for this job? Is there someone else who should be doing it? Because I never did an MBA. I didn't, study, do a master's degree, etc. So I was always very concerned and I was looking out, because at that point, I think we had this itch that we wanted to grow, but we didn't have a clear vision. And this was, I would say, around 3 to 4 years ago. And I felt that lacking, something was lacking. So for me, because I naturally turned to reading to solve a lot of my issues or my problems, I naturally turned to looking for some sort of a course or some, academic program, etc. And I saw a whole lot of programs and everything looked very targeted to me. So it would look like I would go do a, 10-day, 5-day executive program and I come back enlightened, but, it doesn't really change anything on the ground. So I came across this course, actually, it was called the Stanford Seed Program. And it was targeted for businesses that want to scale. So they're specifically looking for businesses that are not in a startup stage, but have figured out their business model, but want to grow. And that is their challenge that they're facing. The interesting thing was the leader did a week-long course once every quarter. And then their team would come to the organization and do the same course content with the team as a workshop. So it was like 4 workshops across a year. And it was a year-long program. And the outcome of the course was to come up with a transformation plan for the business. And this was a really amazing experience for me and my team.
Right. Along with you, the team is also kind of going through that change. Fantastic.
Yeah, it was a fantastic experience. Personally, for me, I met this group of entrepreneurs who are from different sectors, but all in a similar stage of the business where they all want to scale. They're all growing. See, growth stage organizations have very different challenges from early stage organizations. And I find a lot of times that I don't know who to ask these questions to, right? How do I hire the right CFO, for example? Who can answer this question, right? Only another entrepreneur who has done it, who has faced challenges. So I would say that, to answer your question, the first thing is I constantly think that we have to keep reinventing ourselves and, looking at what are the areas that we are not good at and seeing, can we solve it, differently. Second is creating a network of people that you can talk to. I have a strong network of mentors, other entrepreneurs, other leaders in healthcare. I'm always reaching out to, I don't particularly care about, this is where I don't have much of an ego in terms of what will they think if I ask for help. I don't bother about all of that. I ask because, my father always said, if you don't ask anyway, the answer was no. So, so if you ask and the answer is no, it's fine, but at least you tried, So I constantly reach out to people. My process when I have a doubt or when I'm unsure is to talk. I talk to my team, I discuss it with my team, and I openly tell them that I don't know. I'm conflicted. I'm unsure of what decision to take. And sometimes I think, decision making, being very quick in decision making is also good. But sometimes when you're unsure, take time, defer decision making. It's okay. Things will come to you. Things will get clarified. Time does. Sometimes things are very time sensitive, but sometimes we put unnecessary pressure on ourselves to take a decision, take a quick decision. No, not necessary. I would say when I'm unsure about people, for example, I will wait to meet the right person instead of making a wrong hire, in a hurry. I have done that mistake in the past, and I don't think it's not a good mistake to make.
Great insights there. Not only how do you kind of manage self doubts, you also touched upon the power of networks, the power of mentor system, the ability to pause rather than just wanting to make decisions. And on those lines, how important critical it is for you to stay relevant, and what are some of those practices that you'd adapt to stay relevant in the role that you play, or to make your team also realize that they need to also stay relevant in what they are doing day in, day out?
Yeah. So I actually felt that suddenly, we tend that I was in a bubble that I'm only reading healthcare. I'm only talking to people in healthcare. And, I felt this, in a few, I would say a year ago, because especially during COVID, we really, I would say it was like blinkers on. So once I came out on the other side, I realized that no, this is not the right way, because one is everyone has solved your problem. It's not necessary that they solve it in your industry or in your own sector. So you should look around people. There's so much innovation happening. So for example, now every day on my way to work, I listen to a podcast. It's a technology podcast. It's got nothing to do with healthcare. Maybe it's Varun Dugirala and Suchita Salwan, entrepreneurs who are talking just about what happened in the last 1 week in the, innovation startup space, right? And something I hear sparks something, and, and it always gives me so much energy to hear what's happening. And they're always, critically analyzing what companies did and what they could have done. And, so I really like that banter that's going on. So I read the Ken, actually. I had stopped reading the news because it was, I felt the news become very depressing and very, biased. But I think there's also important to be in the know and know what's happening. So I try to read some publications that I think are still neutral and giving, whatever objective news. I think I also try my way of learning is by talking to people. If different people have different, I would say I think it's important to know how you like to learn, because if you don't understand how you like to learn, then you will not enjoy the process of doing that. Like if you don't enjoy talking to people, and if you put it in your mind that that's how I'm going to learn, then you'll not do it. Right. So I get energy from, like, this conversation with you is actually giving me energy, So I love talking to people. I just, keep in touch. I'm always engaging. Like sometimes I think people blame me that I'm always talking work. I'm talking either about your work or my work, or, what they're doing, because I think that's interesting. It's all very exciting to hear what other people do. So these are the few things I do. I think for my team, I find that I keep talking about what I've done. So I tell them that, over the weekend I did this or I attended this. I try to share as many non-healthcare related events or online talks, or, with my team, trying to encourage them. Like, for example, one of the challenges in certain set of my team is they're really smart, but because they don't have great fluency in speaking English, they don't speak out, So I really felt that because of the spoken English today, there are so many ways to learn it. There are so many online courses. So actually there are a couple of my team members who are doing these, and I can see that change, where now they're slowly speaking out, or they do a presentation in English purely. And it's lovely to see that, because I think like a new thing we started last year is we actually once a quarter, our entire team presents their update in the form of a presentation. So they stand up, they present. It actually makes them very uncomfortable because they've not all done this. But I have found that their confidence levels, I can see that change, over the last 1 year. where today they are so much more confident. And I feel like it's important. You're happy and proud to speak about your work. And that comes when you're able to communicate it well. So these are the small things, it's a journey, and I think there's a lot more that I could be doing. But yeah, these are the few things that we're doing so far.
Definitely, you are a cool CEO, cool boss who is willing to experiment, who is willing to do things differently. And Ujjvala, this has been a fantastic conversation, and I would love to kind of continue, dwell more into what you have been up to, what you are doing. And this show is all about creating ripples of inspiration, right? So, as much as we want to kind of continue this conversation, we would also want our listeners to know what is Ujjwala's Inspire Someone Today message to everybody out there.
I think my message would be that find the one thing that you truly care a lot about, and put that as part of your work, as part of your personal life. I personally don't have this believe in this separation of personal profession, because everything's are very blurred, and I think we have to choose our time very carefully, and we have to inspire ourselves, and we find those inspirations in every small thing that we do on a daily basis.
Find inspiration in every small things that we do. That's the message out there, folks. Ujjwala, thank you so much. It has been fun conversation. It has been great insights from your journey, from what you've been doing. Wishing you and Team Aveksha a wonderful journey ahead. Thank you for listening into today's edition of Inspire Someone Today. It's been a privilege to bring in these conversations. If you like this episode and have any feedback or comments, do mail me at inspiresomeonetodaypodcast@gmail.com. Inspiring someone is like creating ripples around us. If you like what you listen, feel free to share them, and let's create ripples of inspiration. Do not forget to follow me on my Instagram handle @InspireSomeoneTodayPodcast for all the latest updates. This is Srikanth, your host, signing off, and until next time, keep inspiring.